when you're all ready. Okay, thanks for joining us here in North Lismore this morning. We thank Brian for welcoming us into his home. Brian's done it really tough. He got rescued during the flood event earlier this year by a neighbour who, when he wheeled Brian out, the water was up almost to his shoulder level. He had to stay in a shed across the road here for 4 days, and they kept having to lift him further and further up in order to keep him away from the rising floodwaters. Brian's story is just one of so many, but unfortunately, of course, we know as well that many of these stories ended in tragedy. We need to do better, all levels of government. We need to do better on planning, but we also need to do better than thinking that we can do just the same thing over and over again because we'll get the same results. And that's why I am so proud of today's announcement. I thank the Premier for the constructive work that we've engaged in, person to person, but also our respective ministers and local MPs to deliver this announcement today. An $800 million commitment with $700 million of that commitment shared between the two levels of government on a 50-50 basis. $520 million to be available for buybacks so that people like Brian can move to somewhere that is makes more sense than just trying to retrofit here. But up to $100,000 to raise some homes in the Northern Rivers area as well, and up to $50,000 for retrofitting. In addition, we have agreement about planning to do better, to make sure that we're not building on floodplains, and I've asked the Premier to lead discussion at the National Cabinet about how we make sure that planning gets better right around our country. This current weather event, has impacted particularly the East Coast states right up and down it. New South Wales, Victoria and Tasmania have been really harshly affected, but Queensland was under threat, and we remain vigilant for weather events in coming weeks and indeed perhaps even months. We had a briefing at the last National Cabinet meeting from our National Emergency Management Agency that we've established under Brendan Moon, but also the Bureau of Meteorology about the weather and what potentially was happening. We know because of climate change, we're getting more weather events and they're more intense. So we need to respond as governments, not as political parties. We need to respond as governments to real people who are having real issues. And I particularly pay tribute to all the local members here who've worked so hard. Janelle here swam to safety herself during this flood event, an extraordinary occasion. I'm determined as the Prime Minister of Australia to work with all state and territory governments to get practical outcomes, to look for solutions, not to look for arguments. That's the way that we're functioning. That's a good thing. That's what the people of New South Wales and the people of Australia expect of us. And I'm really pleased to be here today with the Premier, and we'll hear from the Premier, the Deputy Premier and the local member for Lismore now before taking questions.
Well, I want to join the Prime Minister in thanking Brian to start with in welcoming us to his home. Brian, like many people in the Northern Rivers and across the state, have gone through an incredibly difficult time. It's been painful for many, traumatic, but every time we've gone through these events, we've come out stronger the other side. And when this event occurred earlier in the year, our commitment as a government was to work closely with the Commonwealth Government to do things better. I agree with the Prime Minister when he says we can't keep doing the same thing the same way and expect a different result. We have to have better planning. We have to build our communities in a more resilient way, because we know that flood events that we saw this year will likely happen again. And the best thing that we can do as governments, whether that's Commonwealth, state and councils, is work very closely together to provide that care and support for our communities. And that's exactly what this announcement does today. 2,000 homes will be part of this scheme. That provides people the opportunity to have their home relocated to a safer area. That will ensure that for generations to come, the great places like Lismore continue to be strong in the future. I want the people of Lismore not just to stay here, but for their kids to grow up here. And we needed to do this in a way that works, and I believe the announcement we're making today will do exactly that. It has been a very difficult time, and you know, Brian's story, as the Prime Minister said, is just one of many. But I do want to make this point, as the opportunity I've had this week of travelling around our state and visiting many communities who have been impacted by floods from Moree to Moama. The great Australian spirit was on display. And it makes me very proud as Premier of this state to be travelling around and seeing so many people leaving their homes, putting themselves at risk to help others. And that is something special about the Australian way of life, about our values. And I've seen it on display all week, and I think that is something that we should cherish, because it's what sets us apart. And whether that's uniformed volunteers who did an amazing job earlier this year in the Northern Rivers, from the SES to the RFS, to fire and rescue, to surf lifesaving, but also to our non-uniformed volunteers. And they're just everyday Australians going out to help people in need. Brian just told us about his story. We asked him about when he was rescued. Was it the SES? Was it the uniformed volunteers? No, it was his neighbour. And that is something today, whilst we're making this substantial investment to build back the Northern Rivers in a more resilient way, that we should never lose sight of. And that is the grace and spirit of our people who put their own lives at risk, who leave their homes and property and look after others. So today is a very important announcement. I know it will make a real difference to the Northern Rivers. We've invested over $3 billion, but it's really not about the money. It's about our people. And behind every one of those figures is a person like Brian, who I know that this investment today will make a real difference as we continue to build back in a better way to protect people's lives, to protect homes, and ensure that the Northern Rivers goes from strength to strength in the future. Now I'm going to pass Deputy Premier and then Janelle.
Well, thanks, Premier, and important to be back here in the Northern Rivers. And the Premier and I, when we were here early in the year, we said we would build back better. And today we're actually building back better with the community. And this is where today we're seeing the rubber hit the road. And this package is so important because there are a number of different options that are going to be available to so many here in the local community, whether that's a buyback, whether that's retrofitting, or whether that's raising people's homes. People have been waiting for this announcement, and I know there's been a lot of anxious people, nervous people, waiting to see what this package is going to look like. There's also going to be a lot of questions that'll come out of today as well, but that's why over the next few weeks there are going to be information sessions held in each of the local government areas on the Northern Rivers, so that people are given more information about what is available to their particular needs. This is an important day, but it's an important step forward in making sure that we build the Northern Rivers back better than what it has been before.
Thank you. I'll say something after the extension.
Okay. Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you, Premier, Deputy Premier, Minister, Assistant Minister, and my parliamentary colleagues, Chris and Tamara. And I just say today's a rather historic day, because we've heard that phrase that the Deputy Premier just talked about, build back better, and this is a big start to building back better. And we can't keep doing the same thing over and over, building exactly where we are and expecting a different result. But we can do that somewhat with the retrofitting, with the voluntary house raising and with the buybacks. And one of the conversations we've started with the buybacks is, what do we do with our floodplains? They're our assets, and there's a whole other program that will roll out around that, and that's a topic of conversation very much locally. I know Brian came and saw me, and he said to me, Janelle, I don't want to, he's very humble. He said, I don't want to sort of jump the gun or, you know, the list or anything, but do you think I could be a priority? And David Witherton, who's here, I went out to David, who heads up our Northern Rivers Reconstruction Corporation, and I can't repeat some of our language, but we agreed yes. So we said, of course, yes, that Brian, look, but there's many people who need to be a priority. And just a couple of things about this, for particularly the local media here, you know I've been banging on about this for quite some time, and I knew we'd get there, and that's what I said to locals. I said, it will happen. It requires some detailed work from the state to seek the Commonwealth. That's happened, and it's happened rather, yes, I know it's too slow for everyone, but it's happened quickly from when it went from the state over to the Commonwealth, and the Prime Minister and Premier being directly involved. And so today's a good day. And the other thing I'll say is everybody will say, will it be for me? And I know that there's flexibility built into the program, and that's an important thing for people to hear, that there will be case by case that people will be able to look at if they just don't fit in one category or another. I know that that will happen. And look, I just want to say a big thank you, Prime Minister, and also to you, Premier. Okay, thank you.
Kevin, do you want to?
Kev?
Thanks, Prime Minister. Look, it is a great day, and to the Prime Minister and to the Premier and to the Deputy Premier Patuli and to my other colleagues, I just want to remind everyone and the importance of what the Prime Minister and the Premier are doing today. This has gone down now as the biggest natural disaster in Australia's history. So, you know, to give you a comparison, I mean, the Premier and the Prime Minister are now effectively what the Chief Minister and the Prime Minister were for Darwin in 1974. That's what we're talking about. We've got an intense event that isn't a flood, it's a natural disaster that is the biggest in our history. So that's what we're dealing with. So why today is important, as we've said, so Brian, so look, we are a flood town, we know how floods work, so this wasn't a flood. So Brian went to bed, and this is why today is important. Brian went to bed in 74, and we talk about floods, the water didn't go in that house. So that was the mentality, that was how we operated. Everyone was operating under an event, and there was also the event that when he went to bed, we didn't even think it was going to be as big as the biggest event we'd ever seen. So instead of being under the floorboards, it went to just under the roof, and he nearly drowned. So what does that mean for our community and many people like Brian? He does not feel safe. There's thousands of people, thousands of homes around this area that right now people do not feel safe. And one of the big jobs that we have is we have to make sure that our community not only feel safe, they are safe. So what this announcement is, as we know, is the things like the buybacks, the swaps or the raisings. So what we need to do, and why this is a big announcement, $800 million doesn't just fly out, right? But why this is important is because we're talking about the biggest natural disaster in our history. I say it every day to people. People cannot forget this. I say it kindly to the Prime Minister and the Premier all the time. The biggest natural disaster in our history, which is why we are having to go above and beyond and do things that we will not do in other natural disasters, because this is one of the biggest ever. We had a rain event last Sunday, as we know, and I can tell you right now, for those of you who aren't local, everyone was traumatised. Wasn't traumatised necessarily that we knew that event was going to be as big as what we had in February, but it triggered everything again. I almost don't want you to put this out publicly. I don't say this publicly. We are a traumatised community, and we physically need to do things, and we have a journey to take as well in that, and that's why today's important. Because today it means that Brian's house can get lifted, or whatever option he is offered, and sorry,
Buyback.
Yeah, or buyback, or whichever one whatever the three options that are. So thank you to everyone who's been involved in this decision. It's very important in our recovery and very important to us on so many levels, and it's a very good day for our community. Thank you.
Might take just a couple of questions.
You know about 14,000 homes were affected by the flood events in February and March. Could you explain why only 2,000 will be covered by this money?
We've worked very closely with the local community in identifying those homes that are at most risk. This is about protecting those homes who we know in a year would have a 1 in 5 chance of being affected by a flood. This is the beginning of the process. We need to make sure that we rebuild in a resilient way, but ultimately we stop making the mistakes of the past as well, because then we're just going backwards. So there's two aspects here. One is ensuring that the 2,000 homes that will qualify are given that support as quickly as possible, and we have people who are in a significant flood risk area relocated in a way that works for them, where the homes are raised as well, but ultimately as well that our planning going forward does not just create the same problems. Now, Northern Rivers has been significantly affected. It has been a severe and significant natural disaster, and there are other areas across the state that are affected as well. But there'll be, as it came through the flood inquiry, we'll have different approaches for different areas. This is a significant day because this is the first program of its kind ever in New South Wales. So let's not lose the significance of it. Now, where we can do more, we will. But ultimately, it's about keeping people safe and protecting properties.
And you say this is the beginning of the process. When do you expect money to actually reach people's bank?
Well. Firstly, a lot of the assessments have been already undertaken. In fact, I'd say almost everyone who has been significantly affected who would have qualified for this program would have already had an assessment that has been undertaken. Now, that won't be everywhere, but in the main that has occurred. Now, applications will open on Monday. Community consultation starts during the course of the week, which the Reconstruction Corporation will conduct, and we'll get this done as quickly as possible. In relation to the expressions of interest for land, we've already had over 150 applications, so there is significant interest, but we've got to do it right. And I also accept, and people have said, it's taken time, and that was Janelle's point. Sometimes you've got to have a bit of uncertainty to get the right response. And I'd prefer not to rush in and get it wrong than take the time and get it right. And that's exactly what we've done over the course of the last 6 months, and the same will occur with this program. It may not be perfect, and there'll be things that we learn along the way, but we want to work very closely with the community to make sure we relocate homes in a way that works for them and rebuilds in the best way possible.
You can understand there's a bit of time pressure here because the storm season's just around the corner. Don't
Absolutely.
People need a bit of certainty about when they're going to get this money, when they're going to be able to.
And that's why we're starting on Monday.
But you don't have any kind of.
As soon as possible. We're starting on Monday. Consultation with the community will commence over the course of the week. We've already opened the expressions of interest a number of months ago when we launched the response to the flood inquiry, and we'll get it done as quickly as we can. And I accept, this doesn't happen overnight. This has been a significant event, but we'll work very closely with the community to relocate homes and raise homes as soon as we can. The money is there. And it will flow in a way that works for the local community.
I can respond just to that question about funding. Our funding, which is $350 million, was in Tuesday night's budget. We've worked as quickly as possible with the New South Wales government, and I think that we wanted to make sure too, this is not business as usual. The Commonwealth and the state coming to an agreement like this. This is the biggest of agreement of its kind ever in response to a very significant event, as Kevin Hogan was saying, and as Kevin and Justine and Janelle I spent time with here at the time up here. This was a significant event. It's got a very large response, and we are keen to, our money is available immediately and was there in Tuesday night's budget.
Prime Minister, there's been a criticism that this announcement was delayed for a PR stunt. How long are you expected to be in the Northern Rivers today?
We had a budget on Tuesday night.
So how long are you expected to be in the Northern Rivers today?
We're here. I flew up last night after a budget reply and got in here last night into Lismore, and we signed off this agreement yesterday afternoon. yesterday afternoon, and we're here this morning. There has been no delay.
That figure of 2,000 homes that you're both mentioning, is that 2,000 homes that could be bought back, and there are extra homes on top of that that might get the raising or the retrofitting, or do you think it's 2,000 homes overall that might qualify?
It's 2,000 homes we're talking about, and based on the risk that's there, some will be for buyback, some will be for raising, and some will be for retrofitting. Now, as we go through that process, we will be able to work out how many fall within each category. We've got our estimates in relation to that. But as I said, if where there is a need, we will act on that. So this is the start of what will be a very significant project for the Northern Rivers, and we'll look at each home on a case-by-case basis. Janelle is 100% correct. This is not a black and white approach. This is going to be flexible to ensure that we tailor the support for those people who need it, and where there are exceptional circumstances that might not simply fit within a category, that we will look at that and work with those homeowners to do this in the best way possible.
Yeah, just back onto Tuesday's budget, could you confirm if flood-affected small business owners will be taxed for the emergency payments they receive?
Oh, look, we will respond through appropriately. That's not an issue that's been raised with me by anyone. What we're doing is providing additional support for relief for Tasmanian small businesses, I announced with Premier Rockcliffe just last week.
So you don't know if they'll be taxed, or?
This is not an issue. There's been no suggestion that as a result of support for a small business, they would be taxed. None.
It won't be on the
There has
recovery
been no
package.
suggestion to me, I've answered the question, there's been no suggestion that they would be taxed.
Peter Dutton is calling for a debate on nuclear energy. Are you willing to consider that?
Oh, I'm happy to have a debate about nuclear energy. The most expensive new form of energy you could possibly imagine, one that's many years into the future. If Peter Dutton wants to argue that renewables are bad and nuclear energy is a good idea, I'd say to Peter Dutton, happy to have a debate with him on a proposed site for a nuclear power plant. Happy to have a debate with him anywhere, Bribie Island perhaps, perhaps somewhere on the coast here in northern New South Wales. I'm certainly up for that debate. Look, last night we heard again that nothing has been learnt from the May result. What you have around the country is state and territory governments all working to support renewables. There's a renewable energy zone in New England, not far from here, that's been established by the New South Wales government, and I congratulate the Premier and Matt Keane as the Minister who established that. We know that the cheapest and cleanest form of new energy is renewables. We need to now get on with the framework which has been supported by the Business Council of Australia, Australian Industry Group, Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the National Farmers Federation. They all know what we need to do, which is to get more investment into energy, and we have a plan to do that. And last week we had agreements with the Tasmanian Liberal government and the Victorian Labor government to do just that.
Is it
Premier?
possible to reach net zero without nuclear and have reliable caseload power?
Yes.
Bruce. Premier, could I ask you, you talked about learning from the mistakes of the past and not developing on floodplains. What happens, it's reasonably easy to find examples of developments that have been approved, they haven't been constructed yet, but they have been approved, and locals will tell you, oh look, that's on an area that floods. Is there any sort of thought to tweaking the planning rules where you could go back and reconsider those?
Yes, there is. And I've already spoken to the Planning Minister in relation to this issue, and it's not just matters for the Northern Rivers, it's statewide. It makes absolutely no sense, for example, for us to make the announcement today and then still continue to develop on floodplain. It makes no sense for governments to be investing in infrastructure and road infrastructure particularly for evacuation routes when there's a major flood event or fire event yet still develop and put more people into those high-risk areas. And it's not going to happen anymore in New South Wales, I can tell you that.
So you could retrospectively...
I've already spoken to the Planning Minister. I've obviously got to go through the legalities of those matters. But I've already spoken to the Planning Minister a number of times in relation to this issue. He understands it, and he's working through it, because it's just... we've put over $3 billion in support for flood-prone areas during this period of time over the last 6 to 9 months. We put over $4 billion into bushfire response, $4.5 billion into bushfire response. And you can't just keep putting taxpayer dollars after an event without building more resilient communities. The other point I'd make is on betterment. Right across the state right now, we have significantly impacted public infrastructure. And what happens is the government comes in with councils and just rebuilds it the way it was. And then what happens? The bridges then wash away again next time. Yeah. So we're going to actually get this right and put more money in up front. And I'll work with every local council across the state to make sure when we build back in a more resilient way. So when these events happen again, we have greater protection for our people.
Are you concerned that it would be difficult to find, say you buy back 1,000 or 1,500 homes, those people will need new homes.
Yeah.
Everybody has problems getting tradies, and even if we could get them here, those tradies would have difficulty finding somewhere to live while they work. It seems like a very...
We'll work through that. I mean, that provides opportunities as well in this region. There's no doubt housing is a substantial challenge, but labour is too. And we've worked very constructively, and the Prime Minister might make some comments, we've worked very constructively with the federal government at National Cabinet. Every state across this country is facing labour shortages, and whether that's in public services, in health and education, or whether that's in infrastructure, or whether that's in, as you say, smaller tradies, right across the board, there are challenges when it comes to labour. I think the most recent National Cabinet decision did a few things. One was expedite the visa application process, providing greater access to permanent residency and targeting those areas where there are skill shortages will make a difference. That's not going to happen overnight, but it's a good way forward, and it's one of the biggest issues that I think we're dealing with at a National Cabinet level.
I might just respond briefly on that. Tuesday night's budget had provision for an additional 195,000. We inherited 1 million people were on the queue to get visas into this country. We're dealing with it. It's something that's been asked for by every state and territory government. Something that was a real theme at the Jobs and Skills Summit as well is dealing with that. Might take one more question.
Just one for the Premier.
Yeah, sure.
What do you make of infrastructure funding for New South Wales in the federal budget?
We always want more. And I'll say this, I've said this at every press conference, it doesn't matter whether it's Labor or Liberal in Canberra. New South Wales always stands on its own 2 feet. Now, we've got the biggest infrastructure building program in our state's history, $112 billion over the next 4 years. That's schools, hospitals, public transport, more than anywhere else in this country. And I want our people to be rewarded for our success. That's, when you're looking at national infrastructure, I appreciate, Prime Minister's here, I appreciate that when you look at need, there are other states who aren't doing the heavy lifting. And I say to them, start building as much as we are in our great state, and we should continue to get more funding from the Commonwealth Government. I'm always going to stand up for the people of New South Wales, whether it's schools, hospitals, public transport. We're building more than ever, and I will always advocate the case to the Commonwealth Government for more funding. Now, finally, just in the press conference, can I just say I want to thank everybody in the Northern Rivers. I want to thank the Prime Minister for the announcement today, the local members and the local council, and I've had a great opportunity over the course of this period of time to work closely with members of the Labor Party, members of the Greens and members of the Liberal Party. And putting all politics to one side, every single person behind me has worked tirelessly in advocating for their local community, and it's been very helpful in putting this package together. When these events happen, it's above politics. It doesn't matter what team you play for. Our job, when you put your hand up to run for public life, is to look after our people, and I think today's announcement is a momentous one for the Northern Rivers, and it will make a real difference in making sure for the generations to come we have a strong and resilient community here in the Northern Rivers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, mate.